Can a thing be at once a blessing and a curse, a salvation and a doom? For such I hold what happened next in the history of my people. From every account, the demonic energies used so freely and with no heed given as to their cost, leached all that was wholesome and life-giving from the world of Draenor. Kil'jaeden had wanted to increase the number of orcs so that we would become a formidable army, and he had done so, forcing the growth of our younglings and robbing of their childhood. Now, the orc population was larger than it ever had been, and there was no way to feed the hungry. It is clear to me, as it must have been clear to those living through those terrible times, that if we would remained on Draenor, our race would likely have died out. But how we left, and why we left, this world still bleeds from the wound of that. I do what I can to heal while still safeguarding the interests of this new horde I have made, but I wonder if these wounds will ever really close. Life for my people, a blessing. How we obtained it, a curse. New scene. The Shadow Council had been nervous, almost as worried sick as Gul'dan had been at Kil'jaeden's departure. But now they had direction. He called the council and shared with them the words of the mysterious stranger who called himself Medivh. He spoke of the fertile fields, clean water, healthy glossy-coated prey animals, and he spoke even more glowingly of beings called humans, who would fight enough to be a challenge, but who would inevitably fall to the superiority of the horde. Water, food, killing, and power to those who agreed to help bring it out, Gul'dan said, his voice seductive, almost purring. He had gauged them correctly. Their eyes, some red and glowing, some still brown and intense, were focused on him, and he saw hope and greed on their faces. The work began. First, they had to redirect the attention of the starving horde. Gul'dan was well aware that with the decreasing food supplies and a burning thirst for violence that no longer had an outlet, the orcs had started attacking one another. He had Black Hand send out decrees to all the clans, submitting their finest warriors for controlled one-on-one or small party fights in public display. The winners would receive food from the losing clan and a supply of pure water, as well as honor and fame. Frantic for something, anything to ease the pain of their dual hunger for food and for blood, the orcs responded well to the suggestion, and Gul'dan was relieved. Medivh wanted an army to attack the humans. It would not do if all the orcs had slaughtered one another before the invasion. Durotan continued to give him trouble. The leader of the Frostwolf clan, likely emboldened by the fact that Gul'dan did not cut him down the night of the attack on Shattrath, had begun speaking out more publicly. He decried the staged battles as demeaning. He called for a way to try and heal the land, stopping just short of directly blaming the warlocks for it. In other words, he danced as close to the line as was possible, and sometimes crossed it. And, as had always been the case, some were listening. While the Frostwolf clan was the only one whose leader had not drunk the blood of Manaroth, there were other orcs in lower positions who had also refused. The one who worried Gul'dan the most was Orgrim Doomhammer. That one could be trouble. Orgrim had never much liked Blackhand. One day he might do something about that dislike, but for the moment he did not side publicly with the Frostwolves, and indeed was one of the regular victors in the champion battles. The visions continued. Medivh had a very clear idea of what he wanted, a portal between the two worlds, one that could be created with the Shadow Council and his warlocks on one side, and Medivh and whatever magic he was controlling on his side. They could not work in secret. The portal would have to be large in order for the armies Medivh wanted to pass through. Besides, the Horde was feeling defeated. The excitement and challenge of the arena battles and constructing this portal with high ceremony would give them something to focus on. Medivh was pleased with the idea. In one vision, he assumed the form of a large black bird perching on Gul'dan's arm. Claws dug into his flesh and reddish black blood trickled across his green skin, but the pain felt good. There was a small piece of paper rolled up around the bird's leg. In his vision, Gul'dan unrolled the paper and saw a design that took his breath away. When he awoke, he sketched it on a large parchment. He surveyed it, eyes bright with anticipation. "Beautiful," he said. "I do not understand your displeasure," Orgrim said, one day as he and Duratan sat atop their mounts to survey the building of what Gul'dan called the portal. Everywhere Duratan looked, orcs were working. The males were bare to the waist, the females nearly so, and their green skins glistened with sweat underneath a sun that scorched the land. Some of them chanted rhythmic war cries as they worked. Others were focused and silent. The road to this plateau, running in an almost straight line from what was starting to become known as Hellfire Citadel, was already well paved so that the construction equipment could be easily moved. The shapes of the 4 large platforms based on Draenei design. The irony did not escape Duratan. The original design had been modified, crowned with the now familiar spikes and sharp edges that were starting to make the orc architecture distinctive. But Duratan could remember walking up similar steps as a boy, and walking up those steps again with the intent of killing all he found atop them. But most forbidding of all was the 4th, set a little way back from the other 3. 2 obelisks pointed into the sky like sharp spears, and a statue of Gul'dan sat atop another one. But most forbidding of all was the 4th, set a little way back from the other 3. This to be the framework for the portal, the actual portal that Gul'dan kept promising them would manifest. 2 huge slabs of stone towered into the air, a third lying across them to make the most primitive of gateways. Shapes were starting to appear out of the rock, looming shapes of cowled figures on either side, and some sort of serpent undulated atop it. "Is this not better than having them ride into your camp and slaughter your clansmen?" Orgrim continued. Duratan nodded. "Yes, in a way," he said, "but we still do not know what this is a portal to." Orgrim gestured at the sere landscape. The Hellfire Peninsula was one of the most damaged areas of the world, but far from the only one. "Does it matter? We know what it is a portal from." Duratan grunted with a hint of amusement. "I suppose you're right at that." He felt Orgrim's gray eyes regarding him steadily. "Duratan, I have refrained from asking you this, but why did you refuse your clan the draft Gul'dan offered?" Duratan looked at his friend, answering one question with another. "Why did you yourself not drink?" he countered. "There was something not right," Orgrim said at last. "I did not like what I saw it doing to the others." Duratan shrugged, hoping his friend would not press the point. "You had the same insight I did." "I wonder," said Orgrim, but he did not question further. Duratan saw no need to reveal what he knew. He had managed to protect his people from the horrors of what drinking demonic blood would do to them. He had asserted himself to Gul'dan, and thus far no repercussions had fallen. And Orgrim, ancestors be praised, had had the wisdom enough to realize that there was something amiss and had also declined. For now, that was enough for Duratan, son of Garrod, chieftain of the Frostwolf clan. "I will fight today," Orgrim said, changing the subject. "Will you come?" "I know that you do this not for glory, but for your clan," Duratan said. You fight to win them food and water, but I will not show my face at these displays. Orcs should not be fighting orcs, not even in ritualized combat. Orgrim sighed. You have not changed, Duratan. You were ever afraid of me defeating you. There was a hint of mirth in his voice. Duratan turned and for the first time in many, many long months, grinned with genuine warmth. The day had come. All night, while a ring of warlocks stood guard lest any curious onlooker witness the dark ritual, several stonemasons had been hard at work carving the final seal onto the portal's base. Once they had finished wiping their sweaty brows and turning to smile at one another, they had been quickly slain. The blood of those who created the seal would prime it. Gul'dan had been informed by Medivh. Gul'dan had no reason to doubt his new ally's wisdom, but the luckless masons would not be the last to die there. The dawn was a fiery one, crimson and orange. The air was thick and stale. While the portal was being completed over the last several days, other tasks had been finished as well. The war machines that had so devastated Shattrath several months earlier now were again pressed into service, repaired, oiled, and tested. Armor that had been neglected was polished, swords were sharpened, dents hammered out of chest pieces and helms. The great orcish army that had so disseminated the Draenei was being reformed, decimated. Some clans had been requested to remain behind. Gul'dan had done his best to convince the chieftain of the Shattered Hand, Shadowmoon, Thunderlord, Bleeding Hollow, and Laughing Skull clans that they were needed here. Grommash and the War Song had been particularly hard to convince to remain. For a moment, as the chieftain raged at him, Gul'dan wondered if he had done the right thing in letting Hellscream drink the demon blood. More than most, he seemed to have little control over his emotions. Despite Gul'dan's flattery about how valuable Grommash was to him and how he needed him here, it was Grommash's wildness and unpredictability that made Gul'dan want him to stay behind. He could not risk Grommash getting some mad idea into his head and defying orders. Medivh would not like that. He would not like that at all. Blackhand had requested that the entire Horde gather at the Hellfire Citadel. Over the last few days, several who had returned to their ancestral lands, the Frostwolf clan among them, had trickled in and camped in the area. They had obeyed their order to arm themselves as if they were going into battle, although few of them understood exactly what was going on. They assembled clan by clan. Each clan wore their traditional colors in the form of a decorative sash or belt over their armor, and on this hot, windy day, their banners snapped proudly. Gul'dan and Ner'zhul watched the assembly. Gul'dan turned to his former mentor. You and your clan will be among those staying behind, he said shortly. Ner'zhul nodded almost meekly. So I assumed, he said. He did not say much these days, which was just as well with Gul'dan. He had half suspected that the older orc would try to wrest control from him after Kil'jaeden had abandoned them, but apparently Ner'zhul was too crushed to even do that. Gul'dan thought with contempt about the time not so long ago when he had idolized and envied Ner'zhul. How foolish he had been then, how grown and learned even from the bitterness of deception. Although there were times when he thought he caught a faint glimmer of something in Ner'zhul's eyes, as now, he looked sharply at the other orc and decided it was just a trick of the light. He returned his attention to the assembled clans and smiled. Even though his designs went far beyond simple bloodletting, he could not help but be stirred at the sight. They were glorious. The scorching sun glinted on their armor, their banners waving in the wind, their green faces shining with anticipation. If all was as Medivh promised, this could be the turning point of greatness. The drums began. Deep primal, they shuddered along the earth, threw stone into the bones of the Horde. Many of them threw back their heads and howled as they began to march, falling naturally into step with one another, again a unified people. Gul'dan made no move to hurry. Once they were all assembled at the portal, he would be magically transported there by another warlock. He could enjoy watching the parade of his army march down the wide, paved road to the portal. Standing in front of the portal was a Draenei child. Where had they found it? Duratan had not so much as glimpsed a Draenei in months, nor had anyone else. They must have considered it great good luck to have found any Draenei, let alone a youngling. They were in front of the crowd, standing next to the Thunderlord clan and the Dragon Maw clan. The portal gate had been finished and looked both beautiful and terrifying. Two cloaked figures whose eyes glowing red, either from magic or clever technology, flanked the opening. A carved serpentine creature curled about the top, its maw gaping open, showing pointed, carved teeth. It extended large lizard-like claws and had ridges along its neck and body. Duratan had never seen anything like this, and briefly wondered how such an image had occurred to the Masons. A nightmare, possibly, he grimaced. All in all, it was a formidable construction. But he only barely registered the skill that had gone into its creation. His eyes were transfixed on the young Draenei. He looked so terribly small next to the enormous ark, small and thin and bruised. He stared vacantly at the sea of orcs who were bellowing at him, so far beyond terror that he obviously felt nothing. What are they going to do with it? Draka wondered aloud. Duratan shook his head. I fear the worst, he said. She stared at him. I saw some killing of children in battle, she said. The bloodlust was upon them. I could not condone it, but I could see how it could happen. But surely they will not make a ritual sacrifice out of this child. I hope you're right, said Duratan. But he could see no other reason for the small figure to be present. If such were the case, he could not stand by. He did not want to risk harm to his clan, so he prayed he was wrong. The warlocks were chanting something now, and to Duratan's amazement, Gul'dan appeared right before their eyes. The Horde murmured, and Gul'dan smiled benevolently at them. Today is a glorious day for the orcs, he cried. You have all seen this portal being built, admired the craftsmanship and how it stands as monument to the glory of the Horde. Now I will reveal to you the visions I have had. I gotta catch my breath. He pointed at the gate. Far, far away, in a land called Azeroth, I have an ally. He offers us his land. It is green and lush, filled with pure water and fat creatures to hunt. Best of all, we will continue to exult in the glory of bloodshed. A race called humans, the enemy of our ally, will try to stop us from taking their lands. We will destroy them. Their dark blood will flow freely upon our swords, and we will have destroyed the Draenei, so now we will destroy the humans. A cheer went up. Draka shook her head in disbelief. How can they still feel this way? Can they not see this new land will suffer as ours has if we continue on this path? Duratan nodded in agreement, but at the same time there is no choice. We need food, water. We must go through this portal. Draka sighed, seeing the logic but not liking it. Even now our ally is working to open the portal on his side, and now we will begin. He gestured to the little Draenei captive. Blood is a pure offering to those who give us vast powers, and the blood of a child is pure still. With the life fluid of our enemies, we will open the portal and step into a glorious new world. A new page in the history of the Horde. He approached the bound child, who looked up at him with empty eyes. Gul'dan raised a jeweled dagger. It glinted in the sunlight. No, the word was ripped from Durotan's lips. Everyone turned to stare at him. He surged forward. If this new venture was opened by the blood of an innocent child, no good could come of it. He did not make it 3 steps before he was tackled and went down hard on the sun-baked earth. The instant it happened, he heard Draka utter her war cry and the clang of metal on metal as she charged. Chaos erupted. He struggled to his feet and beheld the crumpled form of the child. Blue blood spurted from his slashed throat. Gul'dan, what have you done to us? Durotan shrieked. But his protest was lost in the roar of the enraged mob of orcs. The Frostwolves had sprung into action to defend their chieftain, and the shouts of battle were almost deafening. Durotan's breath was knocked out of his lungs as his attacker, he could not tell from what clan, resumed the fight. In defense, Durotan lifted his axe and swung. The other dodged, moving more swiftly than Durotan had expected, came up, and the tenor of cries abruptly changed as the earth rumbled beneath their feet, and a deep, piercing sound shuddered along their bones. Fighting stopped, and as one of the orcs turned to gaze at the portal, moments before, one could look into the area outlined by the pillars and simply see more of the Hellfire Peninsula landscape. Now there was a blackness and a swirl of stars, as if one were looking into a night sky gone mad. Even Durotan's eyes were riveted by the sight. As he watched, the blackness shimmered and reformed itself into a scene that both startled and puzzled him. Gul'dan had spoken of a beautiful land, rich with fat prey beasts, fertile fields, and blue skies. Durotan was indeed looking at a place he had never seen before, but it was a far cry from the idyllic realm Gul'dan had described. It was as moist as Draenor, now as arid. A thick haze floated above the brackish water and swaying marshland grasses. A buzzing, chirping sound filled the air. At least, thought Durotan, there was life in this strange place. Unhappy murmurs ran through the crowd. This was where Gul'dan wanted to send them. It was not much better on first glance than was their own land. But then again, Durotan realized water meant life. Orange though the sky was, not blue, and drenched though the land was, not filled with flowers and meadows, it could support life. He turned to look at Gul'dan as the murmuring rose in volume. Gul'dan was obviously trying to cover his own shock. He waved his arms for silence. Azeroth is a large world, as is our own, he cried. You know how different the land can be from place to place. I am certain it is the same here. This place does not look as inviting as I was. His voice trailed off, and he shook himself, visibly recovering. But behold, this is in truth another land. It is real. You. Gul'dan pointed at 24 fully armored orcs who stood beside the portal. They snapped to attention. You have been chosen to be the first to investigate this new land. Go forth in the name of the Horde. The orcs hesitated only an instant, then grimly ran forward into the portal. The scene vanished. Durotan's head whipped around to stare at Gul'dan. The warlock was doing his best to stay composed, but clearly he had been rattled. There are scouts, Gul'dan said. They will return with news of this world. And before the gathered orcs could truly begin to grow worried, the image of the swamp reappeared and the orcs hurried through. They were grinning from ear to ear. More than half of them carried the carcasses of large animals. One was a reptile of some sort, scaly, long-tailed, with stubby legs and huge jaws. The other was a four-legged furry thing, with claws on all 4 of its feet, a long tail, small rounded ears, and spots on its yellow glossy coat. Both were obviously healthy specimens. We have slain and eaten both types of creatures, the leader of the scouts said. Their flesh is wholesome. The water there is pure. We do not need a beautiful land. We need one that will feed and sustain us. This Azeroth will do so admirably, Gul'dan. A murmur went through the crowd. Despite himself, Duritan felt his gaze drawn to the beasts the scouts had brought through, and his stomach growled. It had been 2 days since he had eaten. Gul'dan visibly relaxed. He looked over at Duritan, and his eyes narrowed. Duritan tasted apprehension, sharp and bitter in his throat. He and his clan were needed, he knew that. He also knew that his defense of the child and the reaction it had provoked among the other clans, many of whom had come to the defense of the Frost Wolves, would not be forgotten. He had half suspected that Gul'dan would order his execution or banishment, but apparently Duritan and the Frost Wolves yet had some use to Gul'dan and Blackhand. So it be. For now he would fight alongside his brethren. Tomorrow would have to take care of itself. Whatever betided, Duritan knew he would die with his honor intact. Gul'dan looked back over the crowd of expectant orcs and took a deep breath. This is the moment of destiny, he said. On the other side, a new beginning awaits. A new enemy to slaughter. You can feel it, can you not? The bloodlust rising? Follow Blackhand, listen to his orders, and you will rule this new world as it is your right. It is your world on the other side of the portal. Take it. The cries were deafening. The crowd surged forward. Even Duritan found himself caught up in the thrill of the new world, so lush and ripe and ready for the taking. Perhaps his worry was misplaced. Perhaps this would indeed be a new beginning. Duritan loved his clan, loved his people. He wanted to see them thrive. And he, like all orcs even before this moment, reveled in the kill. Perhaps it would all be well. Axe in hand, hope flourished in his heart. Duritan rejoiced in the race towards the portal, toward this place called Azeroth. He lifted his arms and raised the cry that was on his lips of every orc as they surged forward for the Horde. So that is the end of chapter 22, and there is a short epilogue which we will read right now, and we are going to finish this book. There's only a few pages left, so we're doing it. All right, time for the epilogue. And so began our people's history in this world of Azeroth. We thundered out of the portal like death incarnate, a torrent of blood-mad killers intent on slaughter. It is little wonder the humans hate us so, many of them even now. Perhaps this history I have chronicled will one day be read by human, elven, gnomish, and dwarven eyes. Perhaps they will understand a little better that we too knew suffering and victimization. My father's suspicion that he and his clan were marked for exile proved correct. It was shortly after the Frostwolf clan entered Azeroth that Gul'dan banished them. They were forced to make their homes in the harshness of the mountains of Alterac. The White Wolves who still hunt in this place are descendants from the Frost Wolves, who followed my clan through the portal and whose loyalty could not be swayed by the words of one who bore a grudge. When I was born, my father realized he had to tell the other orcs all he knew about what had been done to them. He approached his old friend, Orgrim Doomhammer, who believed him and would have allied with him had not my father been treacherously slain. When I reached adulthood, I became Orgrim's friend, as had my father before, and it is I who have fulfilled the prophecy of the Doomhammer. In their honor, this land is named Durotar, its greatest city, Orgrimmar. It is my hope that... Scene change. My chieftain, the deep, rough voice, belonged to Eitrig. Thrall stopped in mid-sentence, moving the pen so it did not drip on the parchment. What is it? He asked the elderly orc, who was one of his most trusted advisors. There is news from the Alliance. One of our information gatherers has learned something he insists you must know. Thrall disliked the term spy, but he had spies nonetheless, as he was certain Jaina Proudmoore had her spies in his lands. It was to be expected, and was often worthwhile. Seldom had one of his gatherers insisted on seeing him like this. Something important must have happened indeed. Show him in and leave us, he said. Eitrig nodded, and a moment later a small, scrawny, nondescript human male was brought in. He looked exhausted, undernourished, and terrified. Thrall rose to his full imposing height without thinking, then realized he might intimidate the human. Will you take food or drink? He asked, keeping his voice gentle. The spy shook his head, then amended. Water, if you please, in a voice that cracked. The war chief himself poured a goblet and handed it to the man, who gulped thirstily, then wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. My thanks, war chief, the spy said, sounding a bit calmer. Your news, Thrall said. The man paled. Thrall sighed inwardly. He would never be so brutal or so foolish to kill a messenger for bringing bad news. Such behavior merely resulted in no one wanting to serve as messenger. He smiled in what he hoped was a reassuring fashion. Do not fear. Your news, good or ill, is welcome if it aids me in protecting my people, he said. The man looked slightly less distressed. He took a deep breath. My lord, he said. He hesitated, then continued grimly. The Draenei have come to Azeroth. Thrall was puzzled. He exchanged glances with Eitrig, who shrugged. Some Draenei have been in Azeroth for years, he said. They are nicknamed the Lost Ones. We know about them. This is not news, friend. The man looked stricken. You don't understand, he said urgently. Not those pathetic creatures. Draenei. There was a ship from the skies. It crashed like an infernal stone 2 nights ago. Thrall inhaled swiftly. No one had missed seeing that strange object in the night sky, looking like a star crashing to Earth. So, it had not been a star, nor even an infernal. It had been a vessel. The man was still talking. Proudmoore has agreed to aid them. There is one among them, pale, noble, his presence commanding. Though he is not physically strong, they call him Valen. Thrall stared. The Draenei, the prophet Valen, here? He sank slowly in his chair as the full significance struck him. The worst enemy the orcs had ever known had come to Azeroth, had been welcomed into the Alliance. How could there possibly be peace between Horde and Alliance now? Ancestors save us, Thrall whispered.